Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. John Tran, we're in the building. Our second recap of episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance. John, what's up, man? Welcome.
Hey, appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. It was good to get some more content from ESPN and the folks that put this thing together. I think it's been a fantastic journey of some things reflection, many things we're learning. And anytime we get behind the scenes access or player insights to this magnitude, how can you not enjoy it as a documentary? So episode 3, we get kind of Rodman backstory. They start to dive into the Detroit stuff, and then episode 4, we go into Phil Jackson, Detroit backstory, and ultimately them breaking through as champions. So I'm gonna start off
Hey,
just your general thoughts, man, and some of your big takeaways from these last 2 episodes.
So yeah, I kind of want to start off with a question for you. So if Jerry Krause was still around, what do you think he'd most regret about this documentary? Do you think he'd regret basically just ruining probably the greatest team ever, or do you think he'd regret dancing after the '91 Eastern Conference championship?
I'm not. That was it. Was. I'm not gonna. He definitely is gonna get roasted for that, even posthumously. But um, you know, but at the same token, it was like one of the rare moments where he's like having fun with the team,
hmm
and it's such a stark contrast. I'm glad you brought this up because that was '91. That
hmm
and then 7 years later, most of these guys are still together, but they're miles and miles apart now after all the success they went on to have. And it's sad. Honestly, it's sad
Yeah.
considering, not that they were ever the most fond or loving of Jerry, but Jerry, as they've continued to show as well, he made a lot of the right moves. One of them we'll get into a little bit later with the decision to go from Doug Collins to Phil Jackson. So how everything plays out, how they've concluded episode 4 with him just again these media quotes that are brutal,
hmm Yeah.
right? Him in the Chicago Sun Times making the quote about Michael Jordan while they're on the Utah Jazz road trip, and you look back at it and it's like just completely tone deaf. So I don't know,
Yeah.
man. I just it's tough. It's got to be tough. I wish we had Jerry Krause around to tell his side because from what I've heard from people like Jay Williams, where that he did have regrets. He did wish he could have done some of the things differently. I'm never like I understand the mindset of trying to get ahead of the curve to stay competitive when you know your team is still winning but they're getting older. But to be so disrespectful of all the efforts they've put forward, all of the championship, fervor that they have as a group, and not treating them as people. Like he just looked at them, and I felt like these quotes are like they're just parts of a machine.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, and back to your point about, it's sad that something that they had so special fell apart the way it fell apart, and it just goes into the ego. And I think they touched on that a little bit on the first episode where they're saying Jerry Krause was always always had the underdog mentality, and he kind of, I guess, in his mind wanted to prove that a lot of it was on the decisions that were being made from his level as opposed to a joint between the athletes and the leaders as well. But to back to your question, I really enjoyed these two because it showed the parallels. It went into depth on the parallels between both Dennis Rodman and Phil Jackson. They went deep into Phil Jackson's past, even touched on his book and his writing about him doing drugs. And I know that he from the outside looking in, he was very fond of Dennis Rodman, and I always wondered why. You wouldn't think that he would mesh with him, but just going into that and understanding his past and how they are kind of similar in
They
that
were in many ways, yes.
it was interesting to see on tape.
I really enjoyed both backstories. Now, Rodman was different for different reasons. For me, I've seen the Rodman stuff. There was a Lifetime movie, I think, back in the day. They've had the 30 for 30. They've had a
Mm,
lot of different Rodman
yeah.
content, Bad Boys as well, and just everything he's. I remember actually as a kid, it was a movie with him and John Claude Van Damme. I think it was called like Double Take or
Double
something.
take.
I
Yeah.
remember going to go see that with my aunt. I literally went with my aunt. My aunt was a huge Rodman fan. And like we went to go see that. I was like 9 or something. So like I remember the WCW Nitro, which I don't even think they went into
Him
with
versus Karl Malone.
him versus Karl Malone. Like it was a pay-per-view, but he did some other stuff with WCW during the time. Like him showing him with the Bud Light can, or the Miller
Oh
Light
yeah, yeah.
can.
They got some product placement a couple times through this
Dude,
documentary.
yeah, I mean, so I knew all that stuff, but what was so refreshing to hear was Michael's opinion of
Hmm.
Dennis Rodman, Phil, Phil Jackson's opinion of Dennis Rodman, the things he brought to the basketball court and why he's a Hall of Fame player, right? Why he was such an important cog to not just the triangle, but to their overall energy and edge as a unit during that second three-peat. Um, I love the fact that Dennis got a chance to explain his philosophy on rebounding. I'm sure that resonated with you as well.
Yeah, I just love the detail because the attention to detail. I came away the most impressed with him. He would spend hours in the gym just having random friends shoot the ball, just and have them study the way that Michael shoots the ball. Have them study the way that um, Scotty shoots the ball on
Mm.
the spin. So I know,
The
hey, if he
spin,
misses, yeah,
yeah,
if he misses this way, I know the ball's going to be over here. And I mean, to his credit, look at him. He's one of the greatest rebounders of all time, maybe even the greatest. I know everyone's going to say Will Chamberlain because one year didn't he average like
yeah.
over 30, but that you can goaltend back then, and they counted that as a rebound. Um, but but the fact that the detail that he went into on that, and then to your point again, talking about Michael Jordan, seeing his perspective, I loved it when he was talking about how he was the consummate professional, because when he had that little 48-hour stint away that turned into 80 hours and he had to go get him, they were punished by doing the what I think
Some
it's like
somewhat
catch
sort of
yeah,
gassers,
yeah,
yeah, around the
where they're
floor.
chasing
Yeah,
people.
right.
I didn't want to be PC because back in the day they used to call it catch the Indian, quote unquote,
Oh yeah,
and,
yeah.
and you just start from the beginning. And the fact is, he wasn't there, and he gets there and he's ready to work, and he's the one who everyone was worried about. Hey, let's keep it slow so we're not doing this forever. And we had to do 4 laps before we can even catch him, because he said, all right, I'm ready, I'm here to work, let's do this. Which resonated with me constantly, because there's a lot of people that just always dread going into work. Like, hey, you're there for a reason, let's put in that work.
Well, but Dennis, one of the things, his approach to life, you kind of saw it in this. Hey, basketball is the easy part. We get paid for all the other stuff we have to deal with. That was one of
Hmm.
the many great
Yeah.
quotes we heard throughout this episode, right? There was another great quote between Michael and Scotty that I want to get into later during the Detroit series. But with Dennis, A1 conditioning, always. That's which is kind of the name of his game, right? Out hustle, outwork, and frustrate the opponent in a myriad of ways. But that requires to have this crazy reserve of energy. And you would think after such a bender, you got Carmen Electra involved, who's also sucking out resources from Dennis. Uh, you know, and he's still able to perform even with the quarantine pajamas on in the weight room. No matter what, he's out there. And you do see the edge it gave to the team. Um, Talk to me about because I know this is something that we were chatting about earlier. Talk to me about Dennis and Michael, and specifically around Scottie Pippen being out, and they're kind of looking for who's going to help, who's going to step up and help us. I know that was something that was a really big point for you.
Yeah, it was a big point for me because it goes into, if you've seen all the other documentaries that you've mentioned, it goes deep into his psyche about him needing to be wanted or needing to be relied on, and that completely proved that point because he once Scotty went out, he messed up one game, and he knew he messed up. He never would talk to Michael outside of the gym, and he went over there and had a cigar with him. Basically, that was his way of apologizing. And from that point on, he was the most focused because he knew that Michael needed him, and he didn't want to let him down. So that need, but once Scotty came back, that's when he started acting up again, because he knew he I guess deep down inside he felt like he was second fiddle to Scotty,
Mm-hmm.
and needing to be that number one was extremely important to him. It seemed like.
It's interesting too because he was a guy who already had a very well respected
Mm-hmm.
upbringing in the league. He was a champion early in Detroit. Uh, a guy who was a defensive player of the year, a guy who was really, really, an all-star level defender. You see him in the Detroit Chicago cliques, and I like how they juxtaposed it with, the older crazy Dennis and then the younger, no dyed hair, no tattoo Dennis. That was number 10 for the Detroit Pistons. But seeing how good he was young as a younger player, having to guard Michael, guarding Scotty, switching on whoever. Modern day basketball, we value guys that can switch on and defend different positions. And for those who don't know, like back in the day, Rodman would actually guard Shaq too. He would guard
Mm-hmm.
big men. He would guard Karl Malone, which you'll see later on. Um, David Robinson he would guard when they played the Spurs. Like Rodman, and then on top of that, he could switch on and guard, especially when he was younger. He
Mm-hmm.
could handle perimeter players. So just an incredible defender. But when you hear him talk about rebounding, I feel like that also applies to his overall mindset of the game and how cerebral of a player he was. And I really appreciate them highlighting that right alongside his antics
Mm-hmm.
off the court. But the person that had to make this all work and go together was Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
And it was a heck of a segue because they also introduced us to Doug Collins, late 80s. I forget the name of the gentleman that was before him, but they bring in a Doug Collins who's, what do we know about Doug Collins? He's very energetic, a very emotional guy.
He's a player's coach.
He's a player's coach.
Yeah.
He's a guy that he'll break down and cry sometimes. Like all the emotion you saw after they went into the Cleveland series, how he was almost excited as Michael Jordan was, and he built an offense to showcase Michael Jordan.
Showcase him. Yep.
Right, and so that 1988 season where he's MVP, Defensive Player of the
36
Year,
points a game, or
37
yeah.
points a game, just unbelievable showcase of greatness from MJ. And I think it was interesting from this standpoint. I'm going to make this analogy. This is where Jerry Krause deserves credit because I felt like he knew very early on Doug Collins was the guy to get those young Bulls to, hey, let's learn how to win a playoff series.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let's learn how to fight, and be competitive and be motivated and bring that energy every single day. Because that was something they struggled with early on, right? Was they were 30 and 52 in 86 when Jordan had that 63-point playoff game, but they weren't self-motivated team. Well, now Doug Collins, when you play for Doug Collins, you're going to run through a wall, right? And so he gave them all that. But I think Jerry Krause also had the foresight to know he's also limited. When they talked about Tex Winter and Tex Winter's ideas for the triangle and how Doug would kind of brush it off, because Doug wasn't that type of coach. I watched him coach the Wizards later on in Michael's second act. He's not an X and O type of break it down. He is all. He's a very emotional,
star driven coach.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, let's get the ball to Michael. Let's do this, and we're gonna win, and that works to a certain degree. But when they started with Phil Jackson, and talk to me about his backstory, because me personally, I knew nothing about Phil's backstory.
So I honestly did not know anything about him coaching in, was it Mexico, or where was it? It
Puerto
was
Rico, I
Puerto
think it was.
Rico, yeah. Where a ref got shot by the
It's wild
president.
down there.
Yeah, but I didn't know about that. I did know that he played in the NBA before,
Yeah,
and
for the Knicks.
yes, he
Was a
focused.
champion. Hmm.
Yep, and he focused on kind of the same things that Dennis Rodman focused on: rebounds, blocks, would score every now and then. Um, I I didn't know that he coached in the CBA first. I thought he was always a NBA guy, or NBA or college guy. But learning that backstory and how he worked his way up, learning that he understands, he wants to understand his whole personalities that he's working with, where he has little interviews and one-on-ones with them, sitting down, talk to him. I think they go into depth with it with Dennis, that they were Indian soul brothers, where they
Hmm.
both had, and just understanding the psyche of everyone, breaking it down, and how it can translate to helping a team win. I really loved how they actually compiled all that information in such a short period of time to actually get to the point of where it was. He was hired as an assistant coach to learn the triangle offense and later on take over. I really wish that they went into why they did that, but they weren't really giving any other information besides Doug Collins. They just went that route. So
And yeah, Doug Collins was clearly salty about it,
yes.
as anyone he has a right to be,
Mm-hmm.
because what ends up happening is he's fired after the '89 season, after they after he got him to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Finals. Yep.
All right, and it's a young basketball team. I've got Scotty in year 2, Jordan's in year 5, like, and I've already got these guys. You could make the argument then that the Bulls were the second best team in basketball, because I think whether it was Portland or whoever they were going to play in the West, they were going to beat. It was just a question of getting past Detroit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if I'm Doug Collins, I could legit make an argument where we're the second most talented team in the game right now, and I've got them going to Game 6. I've got the following year, first year of Phil, they go to Game 7. Like, why don't I get another chance? But I will say this: Doug Collins, you do max out with coaches like that, because the analogy I want to make is actually to a team that didn't make that shift, which was the Oklahoma City Thunder with Scotty Brooks. Scotty
Mm-hmm.
Brooks is very, very similar in terms of getting those young Thunder teams that had Katie, Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka, James Harden, all those guys on that squad that were having those little runs. They made it to the Western Conference Finals against the Mavericks. Then they made it to the finals the following. Like, they kept going up and up and up. But if you watch them play, you're like, they're not running any type of system. Like, they were just out there playing with energy and motivated because the coach could get them motivated. But eventually you need a system. You need some sort of schematic advantage to break through and to maximize the talent you already have. I do think you need a coach to teach guys how to practice, how to motivate themselves. But the Bulls eventually got to that point, and Krause kind of did it at the perfect time to shift to the more analytical, cerebral type of coach, like a Phil Jackson, who's not going to become unhinged on the bench, who's going to sit there with Tex Winter and break down how to get Michael the ball on the baseline a lot easier than Doug Collins having Michael dribble the ball on the 5 Pistons every single time. And that's where and how do we get Scotty up to speed? It's not a coincidence that Scottie Pippen makes the All-Star team the very first year that Phil Jackson takes over as the head coach, right? Because they're actually running a real offense now. And to what we saw, what were your thoughts on Michael initially saying how upset he was because he felt like they were taking the ball out of his hands?
My initial thoughts were, I mean, it's Michael. I mean, he wants the ball in his hand all the time. I mean, I wasn't surprised by it at all. Um, I do think he really was close to Doug Collins.
Very close.
and it did affect him, especially when you see the clips of Phil trying to show him the triangle offense and him making his little snarky remarks, but like, nah, no, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. It was like, well, in retrospect, it's a team sport, and you really want to get everyone. And not only that, it puts mileage back on your body because you're not the one who's actually putting forth all the energy and the effort to actually. So him understanding, but at the same token, I mean, he did end up buying in. He bought it. He
Yes, he
dove
did.
right in afterwards, and it paid off
Talent
for him.
took on the.
Yeah,
It did. It did. So one of the things that people have to understand is Michael Jordan was on pace statistically to do everything that you see LeBron doing today, right? From a three-dimensional aspect, rebounding, assists, all that, because his usage rate was so high. We also see this with Russell Westbrook. When you have the ball in your hand and you're making 95% of the decisions, James Harden falls into this case. You're going to have ridiculous statistics. Go back and look at the late 80s statistics of Michael Jordan under Doug Collins. He was also averaging about 8 rebounds and 8 assists every single
yeah,
night as well. So he's right there with all these other triple-double guys. Your numbers, and that's the thing, your numbers are going to go down when you're playing in a systematic offense. This is why you don't ever see Steph Curry average 10 assists per game. The person that leads the Golden State Warriors in assists over that whole period of time was actually Draymond
yep,
at like 6 or 7 a game. But you had like 4 or 5 people averaging 4 assists or more. Why? They're playing in a system. Ball's moving, right? And so everybody's also required now to work without the basketball. And that's where Michael Jordan, for me, separates himself so much from some of the other people in the conversation, because he had to work without the basketball and learn how to play and trust other guys to give him the ball in spots. But also, when I need to, I can still go and take the basketball and go ice. Like, I can still go in my bag and do that in the fourth quarter when shit gets real and we need a bucket. That's no problem.
yeah.
But throughout the flow of the game, to, like you said, keep stuff off your body, we're going to have to play a little bit more conservative with our touches.
Yeah, they touch on that. People are going to probably think that this only clicked with them during Game 5 of the NBA Finals where John Paxson went off. But no, this is what was going on the whole year. Uh, him buying in, it was really hard to do, but I mean, it yielded great success for him, and it also passed along where it could set the table for when he went and coached to Kobe. Like, hey, Kobe, we got to do it. We got to do it this way. This
Yes.
get everyone else, and it had a proven track record that it was easy to buy in. So this goes into the comparison of who's better, Kobe, LeBron. Without that template of Michael Jordan's success, do you think Kobe would have been as successful?
No, no. But and if you, even to your point, I'm glad you brought up Kobe. I didn't know that was the route you were going to take. But even if you look at Kobe, his numbers when he became that level of
Mm-hmm.
a player that Michael was, his numbers were actually very, very similar in terms of field goal percentage wasn't as high as Michael because
Yeah,
Michael was a better shooter. But overall, in terms of the assists, the rebounding, and the usage, is actually very, very similar in terms of how
yes,
Phil would deploy him. Phil never said, I'm taking the ball out of your hands completely.
yeah.
I'm going to give you the ball last 5 minutes to get me home. Like, you go watch the Lakers or the Bulls games, last 5 minutes, it's
It's Kobe or Michael time.
right.
Yeah.
But over the course of the game flow, I need people to be involved so that when you pass the ball to Steve Kerr, he's not cold, right? He's used to being ready for that shot because you've been moving the ball around the whole game, so it's not out of the question with 8 seconds left that he could get the basketball. That's psychology going on with what Phil was doing, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why he's one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. And I appreciate them explaining that point because they use Paxson, like you said, they use Paxson as an example, but we saw that later
Mm-hmm.
the year before with Steve Kerr making the same big shot in '97 finals. So
Yeah.
um, the last thing I want to touch on is the Detroit Pistons, because a lot of this, the coaching changes, how they model themselves, was brought upon, and I highlighted this last week in terms of Isaiah Thomas. He's right there in the discussion and probably underrated in a lot of ways because Isaiah's a very polarizing person, as you saw in the documentary. as great a player as he was, he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. He made a lot of disparaging remarks about Michael Jordan or Larry Bird back in the day. We're not going to get into all that, but that was kind of their MO. Him, Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn. That's just how those guys rolled. Um, in terms of the physical pounding that Jordan took, I mean, what was your overall um, thoughts there? Because the Pistons did win 3 playoff series against those young Bulls teams.
So I don't. If it wasn't against the rules, which it was, I mean, it's a foul. But if you have those fouls, I go back to there was a commercial with I think it was Derek Coleman back in the day, and his line was, "You got 6 fouls a game, make them count." I mean, if you aren't, because no one in this world was at Michael Jordan's level of athleticism, and those guys were. Bill Laimbeer is not at. It, I mean, you have to make it as difficult as possible for him to score the basket. I don't mind that they instituted it. Nowadays, it would. I mean, no, it wouldn't work nowadays because all of them would be out of the game within the first flagrant foul. They would. I mean, they would have to forfeit the game.
They would, and it's hard to be a team like that today. I also think that it kind of, in some ways, like takes away from how good Detroit was at basketball, though, because Isaiah was Tony Parker, Chris Paul, maybe a little bit more athletic than both those guys, right? Like he was amazing, and then Joe Dumars was an incredible 2 guard.
Dead eye shot.
You know, great shooter, great defender. Vinnie Johnson off the bench, the microwave, incredible offensive player. Mark Aguirre, incredible offensive player. Like those are guys that were skilled. But when we talk about Detroit, they always go straight to the Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, and them throwing people around and stuff like the Bash Brothers. And I'm like, there's so much more to what Detroit was. And I also want to tell people this, like the Bulls didn't defeat Detroit because Detroit was old and out of gas. Many of the players on Detroit, for those who don't know, Joe Dumars is actually younger than Michael Jordan. He's a year younger than Michael Jordan. Isaiah Thomas, I believe, is only 14 months older than Michael Jordan.
Dennis Rodman's younger, right?
Dennis Rodman is like maybe a year younger, a year older.
They're
around the same age, right? So this narrative that I always hear where it's like, well, he had to wait for these guys to age out the league. No. What this documentary showed us correctly was Michael was ready. Michael really was ready. He did have to add the strength training, which I'm sure you appreciated, Tran, to his game to add on that layer of armor, if you will. But mentally and competitively, he was ready to beat them.
I think he was ready mentally. I think he just needed his others to be mentally ready.
Bingo. And it mainly it was 2 people. It was Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant.
Yep.
It was Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant. And with Scottie in particular, that was the other quote I love. He said, man, you know, as long as you'll fight, we'll be there to fight with you. And I love that, man, because it's like, at a certain point, Scottie wasn't ready to fight back. I mean, you kind of see him with Charles Oakley playfully when he's pushing him around and smacking him. But as Scottie becomes more confident, and I think that's a recurring theme throughout this documentary, Scottie's confidence and getting his body to where it needed to be, getting his mental to where it needed to be. You see B.J. Armstrong there with the quote as well saying, you know, Scottie had to be pushed, right? Whether it was by Mike, whether it was by Phil, whoever, they knew they were really waiting on him to get up to that point, which is why the 1990 Game 7, the migraine game, where, in my opinion, I think they were ready to win then. Just unfortunate situation that happened.
Yeah. No, and it even goes into the next year where it touched on, hey, they were getting dominated, Detroit, so they started resorting to, hey, let's beat them up a little bit, see if they've learned from it. They knocked over Pippen, and Pippen just didn't even react to it, just got up and sank the free throws. And at that point, he said, we looked at their body language, and we're like, they're done. They know it's over.
Sports psychology is huge, man. It's huge. You see it in your opponent. You know when your opponent's, you know, whether it's body language of the opponent just being physically exhausted or body language of your opponent, knowing there's no hope, there's nothing they can do to stop you.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time when, especially in fights, like those little body blows, You can see the guys who just walk through it at first, and then you can see over round 3, 4, how he starts laboring every single time he just taps you right there. So I mean, it's things like that it makes sports so interesting. It's like, because the best athletes don't always win. It's a lot of it is the mental aspect, like you were saying.
And Detroit had that mental edge for a while, because migraine aside, some can make the argument the Bulls were ready to win, maybe the better team in 1990. Obviously, Detroit goes to the finals and rolls against the Portland Trailblazers. But Detroit also had the same issue with the Lakers before they swept them in '89. They went to Game 7 against the Lakers in '88 and were probably the better team and lost. And so, everything over time, it's like, all right, it kind of goes how it should have gone. But it's just really fascinating to me how they had to get over that hump and figure it out. And we see it modern time. We saw it with LeBron in Miami after his meltdown in the finals, and him realizing, not only do I need to fix my mental, but I need to add a post-up game. I need to add physical toughness, and because it's hard to win championships.
Mm-hmm.
And like, people, it's crazy now to hear that when they're 6 for 6, but it's like, people were saying Michael Jordan is not capable of carrying a team to a championship before that. That was a narrative.
When he was drafted, they said that. So
that was a strong narrative. So, guys, I'm excited to see where we're going to continue to go here.
Are we going to touch on the handshake, or lack thereof?
Oh, good call out. So let's actually finish there. What were your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
They're the bad boy Pistons. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I do kind of agree. I do kind of agree with Isaiah when they showed the clip the year before when they beat Boston.
Oh, in '87, that was '87 when because he was said they were trying to get through Boston, and Boston left. Yeah,
Boston left, and that little handshake by Kevin McHale was not. It was not a handshake, a congratulatory handshake.
And he had to go after Kevin McHale.
And not only that, they were embarrassed too on their home floor. They were legitimately embarrassed. They were smacked around, and they knew that their dynasty was over. That their opportunity. They knew that Michael learned a lot from them. It's like, yeah, it was bad sportsmanship and everything like that. But would you think the bad boy Pistons would go, "Hey, good job"? No, I wouldn't. This is a team that legitimately had been assaulting him for 7 games the year before. They had a Jordan rules. I mean, I don't think that the only thing that I don't like is Isaiah backtracking later on in life about it. I would have been
you want him to own it.
Yeah, and own the fact. Come forward and say, "Hey, I'm a little bit upset too. I think that Jordan had a reason. Was the reason why I didn't make the dream team. Like, I want him to go a step further."
Facts. Jordan would have. So you brought up a whole thing. So Jordan wouldn't have played on the dream team if Isaiah would have gotten picked. Because if you think about it, who was the coach of the dream team? It was Chuck Daly.
Chuck Daly. Yes.
Yeah. So that whole thing, just that's a lifelong thing. I also think the Jordan Isaiah beef goes back to Jordan came in as a rookie. Isaiah freezes him out. They actually didn't even cover this, I don't think, in the documentary. But Isaiah actually froze him out of the All-Star game. Nobody wanted to pass Jordan the ball. They played that little game. Then Isaiah becomes a big brother in the league. They're winning. But all they kept hearing was Jordan's got next after Magic Bird. So I think Isaiah then felt some type of way there because he's like, dude, I'm leading freaking Pistons. I'm now,
yeah.
And I'm not getting that just due. Going back to the Bobby Knight comments in the '84 Olympics, Bobby Knight and Isaiah Thomas are like this. He won Bobby Knight a national championship at Indiana, and Bobby Knight comes out before Michael Jordan plays a freaking game in the NBA and says he's the greatest player
Greatest player
ever.
I've ever
I
seen.
guarantee you Isaiah Thomas felt some type of way about that. And knowing how sensitive he is to some of these things. So, yeah, he's going to put on a good face. Isaiah's part of the media now. He's going to dress things up really well. And Michael saw right through the BS and handled it. I love the fact that they still are heated. I mean, Isaiah says some really out of pocket things about those times then. And that's why Scottie Pippen does not talk to them, because I know for a fact that they said things to Scott. They were trying to break Scottie mentally during this time. They tried to break Jordan physically, but they were really trying to break Scottie mentally. And till this day, Scottie Pippen does not talk to a lot of those people on that team, because I think they went below the belt. Let's just leave it there.
Probably talking about his family and everything
Absolutely.
like that. And they've gone into it. Yeah.
They went below the belt with Scottie. So till this day, for those who don't know, Scottie Pippen has nothing but unfriendly, negative things to say about the Detroit Pistons. But I'm with you on the handshake stuff. I don't think it's the worst, most flagrant thing in the world. I will say this, though. I think it was incredible of Michael Jordan after a Game 7 loss to give a full interview on the court while the Pistons are celebrating.
Yeah.
And he was so professional, right? It was like still had the self-awareness to know we still need to, as a representative of the NBA, we still got to talk to the fans at home, viewers on what they just saw. We're going to come back, work harder. I'm sure he went into the locker room and did whatever and was really, really frustrated. Probably saw his pops, was feeling some type of way. But I think that also made it all the more sweeter when he broke through the following season. So that's worthy of highlighting as well. I'm glad you brought up, though, the fact that I agree with you, man. They're the bad boys.
Yeah.
They're
I think he
bad
just
boys.
needs to own it. I think he needs to own it. As long as you own it with some type of tact, own it. He should be fine.
For sure. Well, we got to wrap up here, man. I appreciate. What's the number one thing you're looking forward to next few episodes?
So they're touching on now the Scottie coming back, right?
We've gotten to Scottie back. Might get some Kobe stuff soon. I think for me it's the Kobe stuff, because that's also kind of like the passing of the torch, if you will, and just where we are right now in 2020, with Kobe recently being gone. That would be it for me.
I kind of want them to go into depth. I don't know if they are, of the actual breakup of everyone. So I hope they go into depth. Like, hey, Phil took off 2 or 3 years and then
went to Lakers.
Joined the Lakers. But I know Pippen went to the Trailblazers.
He went to the Rockets first and then the Trailblazers.
Rockets first, then Trailblazers. Steve Kerr just keeps on winning. Bill Cartwright, what is he doing now? I know they showed him. What is he doing now? What's B.J. Armstrong doing? I'm worried about those guys.
B.J. Armstrong, I know he's an agent.
He's an agent? Okay.
He's an agent now. He's actually a really, really good agent. So, but I'm with you. And I think they'll take the time, at least I hope, to cover everyone's backstories, what they've been up to, and how, Dennis obviously said he feels like they could have won again in '99. I'm sure some of them
with
feel
a shortened
the same
season,
way.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
So,
I do think that the Spurs would have definitely given them a tough out. But yeah, I wouldn't put it past that team.
No.
The Spurs.
No. So yeah, we'll be back next week, guys, just with our thoughts on these episodes. It's been a really, really fun watch. Like I said, revisiting, learning, and experiencing what it was like real time, with all these great players, these legends, not just on the Bulls, but throughout the NBA and the sporting world that got to witness their dynasty and their legacy in the 1990s. So, Trey and I appreciate it, man. We'll have some more content. Oh, absolutely, brother. And you guys be safe out there. Appreciate y'all jumping on. Thank you.
Thank you.